forming a family was a deliberate decision to kind of break down those walls around him and see life, imagine a life beyond that prison. And so, while for many people it would seem insane to start a family in that context, for us it was the same thing to do. It was what keeps things real. And it does. It grounds me. And when Julian sees the children, it gives him a lot of peace and nurture. I compare it to being in a war zone, constant relentless attacks. You know, that there are operations underway, and it's not some crazed conspiracy theory. It's part of the reality of the context in which everything to do with Julian exists. Just like in war, people fall in love and decide to live their lives in an act of rebellion, I think. Falling in love is kind of an act of rebellion in a context where there's a lot of attempts to destroy your life and your reason for doing what you're doing. The older one is actually very much like Julian. He looks a lot like Julian, especially around the eyes, the kind of the eyebrows, and the gaze is very much Julian's. The little one looks more like me, and he has Julian's ears and Julian's size because he's very big. And he looks like his brother, but of the two of them, the older one is very Julian. Yeah. When I found out that my baby was targeted, as a guard actually went up to me and told me that they were trying to steal the DNA, I realized that I couldn't really protect my family. even if I took all these steps, more steps than most people, to try to preserve our privacy and our security and Julian's safety, ultimately, in a way, it was beyond my control, and that was very difficult to realize. I understood that the powers that were against Julian were ruthless and there were no bounds to it, because there's a lawlessness around it, and they were after my baby's DNA, but what else are they after? I feel like Julian's life might be coming to an end. It's been 10 years of breaking someone down, of trying to destroy his life, and it's a well-known pattern, whistleblowers, people who expose the powerful, they destroy them, and we know this when this happens, and somehow everyone has failed Julian. They've all failed Julian. They've taken every negative angle they have been able to. You can do that to anyone. You can destroy anyone like that. You just need to start over-analyzing them. Sweetie.
This is Radio Free Assange.
Deputy Speaker, Julian Assange is an Australian citizen born in Townsville in 1971. He is the founder of WikiLeaks and an award-winning journalist. For the last decade, he has been in confinement or in prison in England. In 2010, WikiLeaks published US government information and documents allegedly provided by US Army intelligence officer Chelsea Manning. The US government alleged that Assange was a party to the hacking of its IT system, therefore violating the US Espionage Act of 1917, and is attempting to extradite him from England to the USA on charges of conspiracy to receive, obtain and disclose classified information. In 2010, Sweden also sought to extradite Assange from England to Sweden to face alleged rape charges. In the course of those proceedings, Assange breached bail and sought refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy in England, where he was granted protection until April 2019. On the 11th of April, on leaving the embassy, he was arrested by English police for breaching bail, sentenced to 50 weeks jail, and after more than 60 weeks, he is still in prison. In November 2019, the Swedish government closed their rape case against Assange. The US extradition case commenced on the 24th of February this year. The case was scheduled to resume on the 18th of May, but has now been pushed out until September. On the latest figures that I have seen, over 400,000 people have now signed a petition calling for Assange's freedom. A widely held view is that the USA failed to secure its IT system and that its wrongdoings, covert operations and war crimes were publicly and embarrassingly exposed. So, under the protection of national security being breached and lives being endangered, the US wants to make an example of Assange that exposing US secrets will not be tolerated. New revelations about the war crimes, where 11 civilians, including 2 journalists, were killed in Baghdad in July 2007, were recently exposed by the Guardian newspaper. Furthermore, there is no evidence that any lives were put at risk by the WikiLeaks revelations. It is also worth noting that Assange is not a US citizen and was not in the USA when the hacking occurred. The USA is attempting to extend its internal laws to overseas jurisdictions while simultaneously denying Assange protection under the US First Amendment that US citizens would otherwise be entitled to. Which brings me to Assange's treatment in England.
What was today's proceedings?
Well, this morning we heard the testimonies and witness statements being read into the court records from many who are testifying on behalf of Julian Assange. We heard from distinguished journalists like Patrick Coburn about the importance of the revelations and the journalistic side of the revelations in 2010 and 11. We heard from Ian Cobain. We heard from Stefania Morizzi, who cooperated on the release, who is a mathematician and an expert in cryptography, about the extreme care that was taking a handling of material. We also heard a testament about what could await Julian if he's extradited, and analysis from the expert on a jury pool in the Eastern District of Virginia, which basically means that the jury pool will be taken from a population where 80% of everybody is either working directly for US government agencies or indirectly through government contractors. So, I mean, there's a reason why the case is prepared there, and the simple reason is Julian will not stand a chance of getting any justice with this kind of jury pool, and actually history supports that nobody gets off if he gets on trial there. There is no justice to be had there. We also heard from Noam Chomsky. His witness statements was read into the court records. His support for Julian and the importance of his courageous acts and the fact that he is doing a public service on a basis of a very clear political ideology. But I think the most important testimony this morning were read into the records were from 2 anonymous witnesses from Spain who have been granted anonymity by the Spanish courts because of a criminal proceedings there, and that was extended to the courts here in London. Those 2 witnesses are from the company, former employees of the company who were overseeing security in the Ecuadorian embassy, UC Global, and their testimony was shocking. And this was not contested by the lawyers for the opposition, by the US lawyers. The testimony was along the line that the owner of UC Global basically made a pact with intelligence agencies in the United States. This went via a casino magnate in Las Vegas, Sheldon Adelson, who paid the bill, but the information was provided to the Americans and the US agencies. They were spying on Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy with sophisticated techniques that was upgraded. Cameras who were not with microphones were upgraded to include microphones. There were stickers put in the window panels of the Ecuadorian embassy to facilitate the audio recording from laser beamed microphones that the US intelligence had installed outside the embassy and could pick up vibrations from the windows and thereby listening in. The witness statements also were along the line that they got instructions from the United States that spying should be specially stepped up on all meetings Julian had with his lawyers. And that is recording the meetings, and also because the lawyers had to leave behind their phones and their computers to basically copy these gadgets and send everything overseas to the US. This is the most serious aspect of the spying, to spy on legally privileged conversation between Julian and his lawyers. And that alone should suffice in showing that this can never be a fair case in any respect. That alone, in any normal society, spying on legally privileged meetings between a client and his lawyers basically destroys every case anywhere in our normal world. If that is not what's going to happen in this court, something is very, very wrong, and there is no justice to be had in our times in this Western world. So let's hope that alone will suffice, but it's shocking revelation.
It's very curious that the prosecution didn't want to contest the evidence.
Well, it's pretty hard to contest evidence which has been compiled with raids in Madrid, with arrests and testimony, and actually accumulation of the physical evidence. Because the Spanish courts have the recordings, they have the audio recordings, they have the video recordings, they have the images of the opened up computers of journalists and other lawyers, and so the evidence is overwhelming. How on earth are you going to contest it? It's there.
Thank you.
This is Radio Free Assange.
We are now approaching the state of Orwell's dictum. Perfect dictum, that he who controls the present controls the past. He who controls internet servers controls the intellectual record of mankind, and by controlling that, controls our perceptions of who we are, and by controlling that, controls what laws and regulations we make in society.
This is Radio Free Assange.
They are about to take every right away from you. You will not be able to fight for any other cause. We are talking about the fundamentals here. We must fight against the extradition. We must save Julian Assange.
Sorry, tell us a little bit about what happened today.
Well, various testimonies were read today at court, but for me the most important ones and the most shocking ones were obviously the testimonies coming from the Spanish protected witness that basically are whistleblowers from UC Global Company in charge of the security of the Ecuadorian embassy. They have provided testimony about the atrocious spying going on in the last years in the Ecuadorian embassy on behalf of the United States intelligence agencies. They have denounced that their boss, David Morales, basically in the last 2 years switch sides, make friends with the Americans, and basically started spying for the Americans. They have changed the cameras inside the embassy in order to record audio. They have backed all the embassy with secret microphones in order to record every single dialogue going on in the embassy. They have put special attention on Julian Assange lawyers and on his meetings with his lawyers, which basically invalidates the judicial persecution against Julian Assange, because means that his persecutors were using illegal methods in order to persecute him. I have been witness in the Spanish case that is taking place in Madrid. I have seen myself enough evidence of the spying. I have seen videos, I have listened to audios, I have seen images of myself, and I have listened to my voice in conversations that nobody told me, and no Ecuadorian diplomat either, that they were being secretly recorded by UCE Global for the American intelligence. The whistleblowers today said that they not only backed the inside of the embassy, but they put a special equipment on the embassy windows in order to allow the US intelligence agencies to listen from distance what was happening inside the embassy by using sophisticated laser microphones. All this instructed by the American intelligence agencies. And we even heard today in court that there were discussions about poisoning Julian Assange in order to force him to go out for medical attention. And there were discussions of leaving the door open in order to allow the kidnapping of Julian Assange, which is a crime in itself.
This is Radio Free Assange.
We're discussing here whether Assange or someone else has done.
Cuando quieras, mi compadre, ¿qué pasó hoy?
Sí, hoy se han dado varios testimonios en la corte, ¿no? Tanto de periodistas y de personalidades tan destacadas como el mismísimo Noam Chomsky. Sin embargo, los testimonios más impresionantes y creo que relevantes para el destino de este caso han sido los testimonios de los denunciantes de la compañía UC Global, que han básicamente atestiguado que estuvieron espiando ilegalmente, secretamente, en el interior de la Embajada del Ecuador, a Julian Assange, a sus abogados, a sus visitas y al resto de personal que laborábamos dentro de esa embajada. Lo importante aquí es que se demuestra, según el testimonio de ellos, que este espionaje estuvo hecho para las agencias de inteligencia norteamericanas. En determinado momento, el jefe de UC Global les comunicó a sus empleados que se cambió al lado oscuro, que entraban a jugar en las grandes ligas y que básicamente empezaban a trabajar para los americanos. Desde ese momento se cambió el equipo de cámaras de seguridad al interior de la embajada para posibilitar la grabación de audio. Se instaló secretamente en diferentes lugares estratégicos de la embajada, incluyendo los baños, micrófonos secretos para grabar todos los diálogos que tenían lugar dentro de esa embajada, con especial atención en los diálogos, las conversaciones que están sujetas al privilegio de confidencialidad entre un abogado y cliente de Julian Assange y sus abogados. el testimonio que hemos escuchado hoy ha llegado al punto de que aparentemente hubieron discusiones, hubieron planes para envenenar a Julian Assange y obligarlo a salir de emergencia por atención médica o asesinarlo, lo cual en sí ya sería un crimen. De dejar inadvertidamente, supuestamente abierta la puerta de la embajada para permitir su secuestro por parte de los americanos. De poner cierto equipamiento sofisticado en los ventanales de la embajada para permitir la captación del audio desde la distancia a través de sofisticados micrófonos láser por parte de las agencias de inteligencia norteamericanas. Todo lo cual es evidentemente evidencia suficiente para anulitar cualquier juicio. En ningún país del mundo se podría seguir adelante con un juicio en que los acusadores, los perseguidores, estuvieron ilegalmente espiando en el acusado en sus conversaciones confidenciales con sus abogados. Eso ha sido lo más impactante del día de hoy.
Gracias, Fidel.
Muchas gracias, bravo.
This is Radio Free Assange.
We're discussing here whether Assange or someone else has done something wrong or not. But what about the war crimes? We are living in a time when our own war crimes are no longer prosecuted. We know that we have conducted aggressive wars. We've hanged people on Nuremberg for this. 175 years for whatever we're accusing Mr. Assange of. It certainly is not violence, certainly is not genocide, certainly is not massacring civilians or torturing anybody. And people for genocide in The Hague, they received 35 or 45 years.
Free! Julian Assange! Free! Free! Julian Assange! Free! Free! Julian Assange!
This is Radio Free Assange.
We're discussing here whether Assange or someone else has done something wrong or not. But what about the war crimes? We are living in a time when our own war crimes are no longer prosecuted. We know that we have conducted aggressive wars. We've hanged people on Nuremberg for this. 175 years for whatever we're accusing Mr. Assange of. It certainly is not violence, certainly is not genocide, certainly is not.
Listening to
Free Assange
Radio.
This is Radio Free Assange.
Basically, I think that Julian Assange is he's a very brave guy. He's a fantastic journalist. He's one of the sort of he's basically being put in prison because he's too good. That's the problem. He's the promise of a free media, which we haven't really had before. We've just had propaganda, and I think that's basically why these sort of powerful states such as Britain and the US can't live with him.
This is Radio Free Assange.
Free Julian Assange! No extradition!
This is Radio Free Assange. Journalism is not a crime. Free